Welcome back. Australia will now recognize Tel Aviv as Israel's capital once again, reversing a previous decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital. The move now prompting concern from Israel. Prime Minister Yair Lapid saying, quote, "Jerusalem is the eternal, undivided capital of Israel, and nothing will change." Former Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison formally recognized Jerusalem as the capital after President Trump moved the U.S. embassy there in May of 2018. Joining me right now in a first on Fox Business interview is the former Prime Minister of Israel and the author of Bibi, My Story, author Benjamin Netanyahu. Mr. Prime Minister, it's wonderful to have you this morning. Thanks so much for being here.
Good to be with you, Maria.
I want to get to your autobiography and, of course, your op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, which was terrific. But first, give us your reaction to what we're hearing out of Australia this morning.
Well, it's a regrettable absurdity because Jerusalem has been the capital of the Jewish people for 3,000 years since King David made it so. So I think this is one of those typical retreats into La La Land that some of these foreign ministries do, and I think it's regrettable. I think they'll come back to it. I was very pleased that President Trump, in coordination with me, moved the American embassy to Jerusalem, recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital, because that's what it is. It's Israel's capital. It's going to stay that way, with or without Australia.
Well, you write a new op-ed in the Wall Street Journal calling Israel's Iran a triangle of peace. You have an iron triangle of peace report in the Journal. And I want to ask you about that iron triangle of peace, because what you've overseen has to be one of the most incredible moments in our time, and that is peace in the Middle East. You write, the world is in crisis. The war in Ukraine could swirl out of control with ominous global consequences. And in Iran, the Ayatollahs are rushing to build a nuclear arsenal while suppressing domestic dissent over the regime's brutality. The Biden administration is pursuing a return to the Iran nuclear deal. We are watching protesters in the street in Iran right now, and you wonder why anybody would want to strengthen the Iranian leadership's hand now, while the people have shown such courage. And yet this is what this administration is doing. Your reaction to this pursuit?
I think it's misguided from the very start. You can't trust Iran on any deal because they cheat, they lie. I describe in my book how I sent the Mossad to get the Iran secret nuclear archive right from Tehran. If you saw the movie Argo, this is like Argo on steroids. The Iranians were pursuing the Mossad men, but they got out, and they brought half a ton of material there, which showed that Iran was secretly doing a program to develop nuclear weapons. Now, do we want the Ayatollahs, who chant death to Israel, death to America, to have the means to deliver nuclear-tipped warheads to every city in the United States? No. Now, the nuclear deal doesn't stop it, it facilitates it. So I was very glad when President Trump left the deal, and I think that the only policy that will work against Iran and other rogue nations who seek to arm themselves with nuclear weapons is a combination of crippling sanctions and a credible military option. That is the only thing that could work, and I hope that the United States comes back to this policy.
Well, I mean, what do you think is the motivation to not do that? I mean, we've got concerns right now that Iran could use kamikaze drones on Israel next. Prime Minister, you've got Senator Tom Cotton joining me a couple of weeks ago on Sunday Morning Future saying, you know, the administration needs to speak up about Iran. And yet we continue to see these negotiations, even as they've got fatwas on the back of former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and John Bolton. What is the motivation in your view?
Well, you'd have to ask them, but I think it's just the wrong view. I think that underneath it all, those who seek the deal with Iran want to kick the can forward. There's not a lot to kick forward because Iran will continue its progress with a deal or without a deal. And again, they want to become a nuclear threshold state, which is what the deal says they will actually do with international approval. That's crazy. That's giving them immunity alongside with hundreds of billions of dollars with which they'll build the ICBMs to reach America, the ballistic missiles, the nuclear bombs, and pervade terrorism throughout the Middle East and the world. It doesn't make sense. You have no choice when you have bully states like this, you have to prevent, and Islamist radical states that want to do away with Israel, with America, everything we stand for, we have to confront them, and we have to confront them early on. It'll be much harder to confront them when they have nuclear weapons.
So what are your thoughts on the last year and a half? I mean, Secretary Pompeo has joined me many times talking about the strength of the Abraham Accords. You worked with the Trump administration on the Abraham Accords and saw an incredible result, positive result as it relates to peace. And yet we had a botched up withdrawal from Afghanistan. Now China is likely thinking and working on invading Taiwan. There is open source reporting right now that says that China will go into Taiwan within the next 18 months. You had Anthony Blinken say that just yesterday. They're on a faster timetable. You've got the Saudis now pretty much snubbing this administration because of just what we were just discussing, the Iran deal. What is your assessment of the global stage today?
Look, I think that, Maria, that we have to come back to an appreciation of what keeps the peace. There are some who believe that the way to keep the peace and prevent these calamities that you're talking about is basically the use of soft power. That is our superior values, culture, democracy, even Hollywood. Look, soft power is great, but it's without hard power, hard, overwhelming military and economic power, it's largely useless. I've devoted my life, as I described in my memoir, to build Israel's hard power, alongside its soft power, but hard power. That is to effect a free market revolution that made Israel a powerhouse of innovation and enterprise, allowed us to fund our military and our intel and our cyber, and the result produced a remarkable change. Alongside the rise of the Iranian threat, there was the rise of Israeli power. And the result of that was that we could form peace treaties, 4 historic peace treaties with Arab states that now saw Israel not as an enemy, but as an indispensable ally in confronting the common threat against Iran. I think this is the prescription for the world as a whole, and I hope people will read the book and glean out of it this insight. I think what you need is that like-minded states, free world states, should unite in building formidable hard power, formidable economic and military power, and diplomatic alliances that will shore up our power vis-a-vis those who want to eradicate our life or eradicate our existence. There is no substitute for that because, you know, Lincoln said, well, we have to appeal to the better angels of our nature. Well, he was right, except he had to win the bloodiest of America's wars to do that. You don't want to be in that position. You want to, if you want to avoid war, you know, be strong. If you want to win wars, be strong. Just don't be weak. Yeah. Well, we're seeing a lot of weakness right now, unfortunately. But you're talking about, in your op-ed and in your autobiography, about unshackling the Israeli economy. And that was really what was required to transform what was a semi-socialist economy and open that up to free markets. And I think that was just such a brilliant move. And I'm glad you mentioned it in the op-ed as well as your book. But I want to ask you what happens next, particularly with the Abraham Accords. Your autobiography, Bibi, My Story, went on sale yesterday, and you're discussing your life, relationships, politics, achievements, failures, what you still hope to accomplish. So my question about what you still hope to accomplish, do you think Saudi Arabia will become part of the Abraham Accords? Well, you should know that it already has become, in a way, because 2 years before the Abraham Accords that took place in 2020, when we signed these 4 peace treaties with Arab states in 4 months, 2 years before that, Saudi Arabia opened up its airspace to hundreds of thousands of Israelis who now fly regularly to the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. Now, you know that didn't happen accidentally, and I sort of hint at it in my discussions about the clandestine meetings that I had with Gulf leaders. And you should also know that there's no way that the peace treaties we had with the Gulf states would have taken place without the approval of Saudi Arabia. So my hope is, if I win the election, God willing, you know, nobody can know for sure, in 2 weeks, then my goal would be definitely to expand the circle of peace to include Saudi Arabia, because once that happens, we really basically are ending the Arab-Israeli conflict, and then we can move to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Everybody said for a quarter of a century, first you have to get peace with the Palestinians, and then you'll get peace with the Arab world. I beg to differ.
Yeah.
I said you can't get peace with the Palestinians because they still don't want to recognize the state of Israel.
Right.
So if we wait, we'll wait another quarter of a century. I went to the Arab world. That would be a principal goal. The second one would be to stave off the Iranian threat. Meet the challenge, seize the opportunity. It's good for Israel. It's good for the Arab countries. It's good for the world. Good for business.
And final question, Mr. Prime Minister, what are your thoughts on this administration selling oil from the Strategic Oil Reserve? Once again, oil, the weapon, when we look at the foreign policy agenda. But this president is selling off. We're at the lowest levels in the Strategic Reserve since 1984.
Well, the one thing I would say is, I don't know about that, but I will say that if you want to take a consistent stance, you can't say on the one side, we'll be hard on Russia, but at the same time soft on Iran and remove the sanctions on Iran that will feed Iran with billions and Russia as well. So I'm saying be consistent on Iran, apply sanctions on Iran equally, and everybody else, who's trying to sell to Iran will lose out. But I think too that developing your own energy resources is something that has guided me, because I encourage that in Israel. We found offshore gas. We're now supplying Europe with offshore gas. And, we always said Moses was the greatest leader, but he was a lousy navigator. He brought us to the only place in the Middle East without oil. Not true.
Wow.
He brought us to a place with a lot of gas.
Yeah.
So he may have been a good navigator after all.
Mr. Prime Minister, it's good to see you this morning. Thanks very much. We will see the book on
Thank you,
sale,
Maria.
and we appreciate your time. Bibi, My Story.